Etihad, Emirates and Qatar Airways, three of the biggest Middle Eastern giants, known for luxury, service and prestige. But here's a question nobody seems to be asking. Why is Etihad so much cheaper than Emirates and Qatar Airways? Is the low price a sacrifice on quality, or is Etihad offering something that's a little bit too good to be true? In this video, we will dive into what £442 can get you on a flight from London Heathrow's international airport all the way to the capital of the United Arab Emirates. What is Etihad doing to keep their fares so competitive, and why is this the case? Is Etihad really just as good, or is something seriously lacking? That's what we will unpack in today's video. Now before we check into our flight, we're actually going to head to Terminal 3 first, because my dad, who's not actually flying with us, wanted me to personally escort him to his check-in line. Now I'm actually not going to see him for another year because he refuses to live in Australia with me, so I obliged just to spend more time with him before we actually went our separate ways. Now Etihad Airways actually flies out of Terminal 4 and the check-in counter this evening is not actually that busy, and the reason for that is because Etihad puts up 4 flights out of London and this flight departs within 90 minutes of the previous one. Now, Etihad actually has a very strict cabin bag policy, and if you watch my very first video, you'll understand how I got screwed over by this. But basically, if you're in economy class, you're under a 1 cabin bag policy. Now, the funny thing is, according to their Facebook team, a fanny pack would classify as a second bag, but the actual check-in staff at the airport couldn't care less. However, Etihad will weigh your cabin bag, and if it's over, you will need to repack it. Now, something cool about Terminal 4 is they've actually got a viewing deck, and shout out to Avi Central, who showcased this in a lot more detail in a video where he documented the exact same flight. And if you would like to go there, once you pass security, keep walking right. However, the views this evening, not impeccable. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Etihad has 4 flights a day between London and Abu Dhabi. So let's break this down. First, you've got these 2 flights, and both of them are operated by the 787 Dreamliner. A good aircraft in my opinion, just not the best. Then you've got these 2 flights, and both of these are operated by the A380-800. And apart from the fact that these are just bigger planes in general, there's actually a technical reason as to why I'd advise you to pick these 2 flights over the 787 flights. But we'll get to that in a moment. Now, our flight this evening is operated by Alpha 6-Alpha Papa Juliet, which can sit 498 passengers split across 3 cabin classes. The ground staff today really enforced the boarding procedure quite well, but they were really polite in doing so. And the guy who eventually scanned my boarding pass had a look at my onward flight to Australia and said, "Oh, long way to go, huh? But at least you've got good seats." Now, one thing you should probably know is that Etihad will try to sell you just about anything they can. Priority access, better seats, and even their business class lounge apparently is up for grabs. Now, it actually used to be a lot worse when Etihad was at the peak of their financial woes. We were greeted very well by the very accommodating crew and shown to our seat 46 kilo. Now, selecting this seat costed me 47 of the Queen's finest. Now, as I mentioned earlier, why specifically choose the A380? Well, the reason for that is because of this cabin that we're in right now. The A380 has 72 of these seats in economy class, which are listed as standard seats on Seat Guru, but that's wrong, because these seats all come with extra legroom, and you can either pay for it like I did, or you can ask if an agent could assign it to you for free when you're at the airport, and get it absolutely free of charge. Now, as far as I know, there's actually 2 variants of their 787 Dreamliner, and access to these seats are either not available or highly limited. And for the economy class product overall, you get an in-flight entertainment system, coat hooks and charging ports. Runway 27 will be our assigned runway for departure, and the pilot came and apologized like it was something very unusual for Heathrow. And like seconds before we left the gate, the cabin crew came and handed out this amenities pack that had earplugs, an eye mask and hand lotion.
Conditions of the airport. From this moment, relax and enjoy the flight with Etihad Airways. Thank you.
Remove it from this packaging and place it over your head.
Now there's a lot of things that Etihad does that absolutely frustrates me, and I've touched on them in other videos, so I'm not going to bore you in this one, but across all my Etihad flights, their catering stays extremely consistent. For an economy class product, the offering is fairly comprehensive. Tonight we've got chicken, lamb or veg ? And the reason I say that is because when the crew went to everybody else in the cabin, they said, "Excuse me, would you like chicken, lamb or veg?" But by the time they came to my row, it was only chicken or lamb that they had available. So when the two girls next to me asked if they could have veg instead, the stewardess said, "We don't have veg anymore." Now the trolleys that they rolled out only served our part of the plane, so I'm really curious as to how many veg meals they pre-catered to. I find that a little bit suspect. Now for this evening's entree, you've got some corn and carrots mixed with hummus that you can't really see from this angle. All in all, I found the entree to be relatively uninspiring, but it was the entree, so I wasn't really super fussed. But when it came to the main course, I was absolutely blown away. Just a fantastic culinary delight, pan-fried to perfection and seasoned extremely well, and was accompanied with a delicious side of potato mash and vegetables, like Michelin level stuff. It was that good. Now, I don't frequent Michelin star restaurants like at all. I'm just using this analogy to give you an idea of how good it actually was. And to finish this all off, we had a delicious passion fruit cheesecake, and Jim Bro Nilski was not satisfied, but weird airline reviewer Nilski definitely was. Now because EY68 is a red-eye flight, they only really operate one bar service. I really did have a little bit of a chuckle when the crew came around with the drinks, and there were some young English lads behind me, and they really asked the stewardess, "Is the alcohol for free?" And I can't even blame them, because I've seen what European airlines offer these guys. They're used to the bare minimum. In terms of the in-flight entertainment, they had some of the latest releases, as well as a few classics, but the headphones aren't really that good, and I kind of just wanted to listen to my bangers instead, so I was happy to do away with the IFE tonight. Now, I read a lot of comments on my videos, and this guy right here, his name is Ryan, and he loves food and travel. In one of my other Etihad videos, pointed out that the sheer level of expat workers with varying cultural backgrounds can lead to a difference in the interpretation of service. And this can be true especially on my way up to London, but definitely not the case today. But the man has a point. Etihad recruits from 112 countries around the world, and the crew from Japan might not have the same interpretation of service as their colleague from Lebanon. Now the cabin crew on today's flight in particular were really friendly, usually doing every single thing that they did with a smile. I was chatting with one of them and she told me that she was flying to Milan later tonight. Like, bro, you only just got back from Europe. Does your airline not give you any rest? This feels a little bit illegal. Now, in terms of the facilities, the lav was kept clean right throughout the flight, but one thing I really like is that in economy class, the lavatories have full-length mirrors. There's also hand wash as well as hot and cold water dispensers. Personally, it's never about how glossy and shiny the facilities are, but rather how well they're kept throughout the flight. And on this flight, they did an impeccable job. So let's take a look at why Etihad offers some of the most competitive fares, especially if you're trying to get from Europe all the way to Australia. Now, just for the sake of simplicity, I've quoted all of these in pounds, just to give my UK followers an idea of how much they can expect to pay. Now, this is a snapshot of all the flights you can choose to fly from London to Sydney. As you can see, the most affordable flight, after a few Chinese carriers, which I'll cover separately, is actually Etihad Airways. Now, I've identified 3 main reasons as to why Etihad is cheaper than your usual culprits and the even bigger culprit. And the first reason is because Etihad doesn't have the kind of scale, volume and sheer product capability that Emirates and Qatar Airways offer. So they don't have a choice, they have to offer competitive prices to stay in the game. This is simple economics. Second, Etihad has a much larger group of narrow-body planes compared to its counterpart Emirates. Of these narrow-body planes, a lot of them fall under the Neo variant, which not only reduces their cost by as much as 8% year on year, but also improves their fuel efficiency, meaning that Etihad is not only authorized by myself, the cost-conscious flyer, but also Greta Thunberg. And number 3 is the add-ons. Etihad will sell you a relatively inexpensive ticket in hopes that not just your travel plans might change like every other airline, but relying on you to purchase a bunch of these add-ons that we talked about in the first part of this video. So when you accumulate all of that, you're actually able to get a relatively inexpensive ticket. Now, as dawn slowly broke over the Arabian Peninsula, I noticed how selective the cabin crew were in who they offered refreshments to, and considering the quality of what they were serving, I'm very glad that they didn't wake people up for this. They kinda just walked through the cabin, observed who had their eyes open, and politely asked them if they wanted their refreshment. This was a roasted red pepper and tomato pastry. It kind of just tasted like they'd taken some pita bread and slapped some pasta sauce on it, and I was really stumped because they did so well on the dinner service. Now, in fairness, Etihad probably felt like their hands were a little bit tied in this refreshment service, because the catering company at Heathrow enlists Monty's Bakehouse for this particular product, and Monty's Bakehouse only got clout because Air Canada tried their products at a rugby match and then invited them to start catering for their flights. So this is all Air Canada's fault, if anything. So just because you pay an inexpensive fare, it doesn't mean you're being deprived of anything. In fact, I think the Etihad economy class product is substantially better than a lot of other economy class products you get today. Of course, that doesn't mean that Etihad is free of shortcomings, and that's something we're going to take a look at after we touch down. So stay tuned and don't go anywhere, because we're going to be discussing the ways in which Etihad can improve and how they performed on today's flight overall. So let's start with the positives. Where has Etihad done well today? First of all, if you haven't already figured out from the title of this video, numero uno is an inexpensive ticket. Now this ticket price includes excellent cabin crew as well as a 3-course meal plus an open bar. Now this was quite a shocker to me, but I also found the Heathrow airport staff to be excellent. The seat comfort, recline and pitch are all perfect for you to snooze like a baby. However, Etihad does have a few shortcomings, and I think we should discuss them because, well, that's the whole purpose of this channel. Number one is their restrictive carry-on policy. No personal items, but this policy is consistent not just with Etihad Airways but for all carriers across the Gulf. And number two is the Abu Dhabi stopover program that just doesn't seem to work and has a lot of exclusion clauses. If you are adamant on using the facility though, just remember that Etihad will charge you $15 for the quote-unquote free service, and they're going to keep that money regardless of whether they find you a hotel or not. I won't go into this too much, but type Abu Dhabi stopover in the TripAdvisor search bar and go for your life. All in all, however, thoroughly satisfied with Etihad today, and here is the final score for today's flight. Remember to check out the description for any details that are pertinent to this flight, and while you're down there sussing those deets out, subscribe to me as well as follow me on TikTok and Instagram. That's all for now, have a very pleasant day, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye bye.